Time to move? Skip the hassles of selling during the holiday season and sell your home directly to Opendoor. Request an all-cash offer in minutes, close, and get paid in days. You can even pick your close date so you can move after New Year's. Start your move at opendoor.com or download the Opendoor app. Opendoor is represented by Opendoor Brokerage Inc., license 02061130 in California, and Opendoor Brokerage LLC in its other markets. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello, Beat Check listeners. I'm Julia Silverman, and I'm the Oregonian's K-12 education reporter. Typically on this podcast, my colleagues and I interview other reporters about their work. But with the 2025 legislative session right around the corner, I thought we'd try something a little different. With me today for a roundtable discussion are the superintendents of the state's 3 largest school districts: Kimberlee Armstrong from Portland Public Schools, Gustavo Balderas from the Beaverton School District, and Andrea Castaneda from Salem-Keizer Public Schools. All 3 are leaders in an effort among Oregon school districts with more than 10,000 students to speak to policymakers with a clearer and more unified voice about the specific issues their communities are facing. Their school districts, especially Salem-Keizer, serve some of the highest needs and most complex student groups in the state, including large percentages of students who are entitled to special education services and students who are learning to speak English. Salem narrowly averted a strike last winter. Portland weathered an 11-day teacher strike in the fall of 2023, and Beaverton is currently in mediation with its teachers union in hopes of avoiding a labor action. And all 3 are keeping a close eye on conversations in Salem about education funding as they begin building their budgets for the 2025-2026 school year. Kimberlee, Gustavo, Andrea, welcome to Beat Check.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gustavo, let's start with you, since you've been in your role as superintendent the longest of those with us today. Tell us a little bit more about what brings this group and other urban superintendents in Oregon, like those in Bend, Medford, and Eugene, together at this time, with a real emphasis on what it actually costs to run a school system.
Well, thank you for having us. Like every school district's unique, but we're really a lot more alike than we are different. And we're all facing the same challenges and opportunities, and it's helpful to communicate and collaborate around these issues impacting Oregon public schools. We meet pretty often as school superintendents in various forums. Our state association partner, the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators, and their executive, Dr. Krista Parent, supports all 197 districts across Oregon. But we meet as a large group because we're unique as large systems compared to the small rurals. So that's something that enables us to collaborate on issues that we are all facing as large urbans or larger systems. From cell phone policies to budget situations, we can share ideas and resources that help others. And it's that impact of collaboration that's really for the greater good. School finances have been a hot topic for my 3 decades being in Oregon. So I think I'm the tenured administrator in the group, being in public education for 35 years. The state school fund really hasn't grown in total dollars along with inflation, but over the years, Oregon has been putting a lower and lower proportion of the state budget in K-12 schools. And that's something that as school superintendents we talk about because, again, we have 197 school superintendents, but we have over 160 that are new the last 3 or 4 years. So we have a lot of newer people into the position. So educating people about what's happened before to what it is now and how we need to really stick together to really frame up our knowledge base in terms of what's happening across our schools. So we talk a lot about current service level. And that really is the cost of doing business. And it hasn't kept up. It hasn't kept up over the decades since Measure 5 hit. So a perfect example, the 21-22, the last biennium, I think we had a 3.3% increase. But we know that inflation was much higher. I think one of those years was 8.7. So as school superintendents, us getting together and talking about how it impacts each other, each district, and what we can do to really provide ideas in terms of sharing knowledge is something that's really impactful because, again, all of us also have certain situations that are similar, such as special education funding. That's one of the things that we're trying to advocate for, trying to raise our current support from we have a cap in Oregon that we get from the state, about 11%. We're trying to raise that up to 15% because I know that my students in Beaverton, we're at 12.8, but I know Andrea is much higher in Salem-Keizer. And that's actual dollars. It's fundamental to our system in terms of how to run programs. So again, for us as superintendents, being able to collaborate is something that is needed now more than ever in public schools. And having the ability to be able to have Zooms now since COVID hit, we're really familiar with being able to get online, and we're able to really share resources. So I think that's something that we're going to continue to do in many forums, either locally or as a state. So that's something I appreciate my colleagues in Portland and Salem always being there, always being a text away if I ever need anything.
Great. And Andrea, let's continue on the funding formula track for a moment. Before coming home to Oregon and starting your job in Salem, you worked on an education funding formula overhaul in Rhode Island, and you've been clear about what you see as the need for a similar effort in Oregon. In your opinion, do you think lawmakers are prepared to go that far this session? And if not, tell us a little bit more about some of the budget changes you do think have a realistic chance of passing when lawmakers convene in 2025.
I don't think that Oregon lawmakers have got the appetite for a funding formula overhaul right now, but I do think we should be a little gentle with them in understanding the reasons why. I heard a story that might be apocryphal, but I'm going to retell it anyway. The story I heard is that when you're a new governor and you join the National Governors Association, you go to governor's boot camp. And so they open it up, it's all the new governors, and they say, we're going to tell you one thing you are not going to do. And the one thing they tell new governors is, do not allow anyone to convince you to reopen the state education funding formula. And even if it's apocryphal, I think it's still like a powerful story, because in order to do it, three things have to be true, and they are so rarely true at the same time. First, there has to be widespread demand from the electorate around PK-12 funding because they see something is broken or wrong uniformly. A second is that there has to be a group of people that have tremendous political courage and will to tear open the single largest and most expensive enterprise in the state. And the third is there has to be enough money in the state in the state budget to cover the escalating costs of reopening it. So in fairness to our legislators, I don't think any three of those three are true right now. And I think that they are doing the very best that they can with the conditions we do have. And what I do think could happen, and I do think we have to join together to clearly advocate for, is the CSL changes that Gustavo talked about. We need the formula to keep pace with the very real escalating costs that school districts face. Just keeping pace doesn't improve outcomes, but it does help us get out of the situation where every year we carve into ourselves and say, it'll be okay, we can do more with less, because eventually we can't. And many districts are already at that point.
Thank you for that thoughtful answer. Kimberlee, one of the biggest issues in the Portland Public Schools teacher strike, a topic that has continued to reverberate in labor negotiations statewide, as we just saw in Albany, is class size. I can see firsthand that you've made rebuilding relationships with teachers one of the hallmarks of your first 6 months in Portland. But superintendents have historically been quite skeptical of the Oregon Education Association's efforts to make class size a mandatory topic of bargaining. How do you think that this group can navigate that difference of opinion this year, particularly as you certainly are working with teachers and other educators to advocate for more education funding overall?
Absolutely. Class size is undeniably a critical issue, not only here in Portland, but across the state, as you've mentioned, and as seen in Albany. It's a topic that strikes at the heart of teaching and learning, and I recognize how deeply it resonates with our educators and, of course, our broader community. So entering the system as a brand new superintendent, focused on rebuilding relationships with our teachers and our union leadership has been a critical first step, and is, as you've mentioned, been reflected in my first 6 months. I think to navigate differences of opinion, we must start off with our shared goals. We all want what's best for our students, and ensuring an environment where every single one of our students can thrive should be and is a priority for us in Portland, and should be a priority across the state. And so while I think it's clear that we approach the topic of class size from different vantage points, centering our discussions on the student outcomes provides the foundation that we need. And it's not a conversation that's just about numbers. It's about the quality of education and equity for every learner in our system. And I also believe that it is important to listen to our teachers' experiences with class size and the impact it has on their ability to support students. That is a key step. So I think beyond that, engaging families and the community in this dialogue helps us see a fuller picture of what's at stake. And so I do believe that rebuilding trust means showing that we're not only willing to listen, but that we're ready to collaborate toward solutions that reflect everyone's concern. And we need to be creative, right? Addressing class size doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition, right? It doesn't have to be this or that. And so, a couple of things that we can think about are phased in approaches and or even flexible staffing models, and where we can make incremental progress while balancing the realities of our budget. We're looking at a $40 million deficit, and reducing budgets and keeping class sizes where they're at or reducing isn't work that's easy. But I am confident that when we lean into our shared goals and we engage authentically and that we stay solution focused, we create a path that works for our students, that works for our teachers, and works for our community.
Great. Thank you. Gustavo, let's go back to you. I know, and many of our listeners probably know, that Beaverton is currently in mediation with the Beaverton Education Association. I'm so curious about what your district learned from watching the negotiations in Salem and Portland play out, and how that dynamic informs your advocacy at the state capitol, specifically around the cost of living increases that have been requested by staff.
Thank you for the question. And we did watch negotiations in Portland, Salem very closely, and it's been challenging everywhere. We actually watched negotiations across the state, and typically we have about a third of all districts in the state negotiating every year. We're moving forward with mediation in Beaverton and making progress toward a resolution. Different districts have different financial situations, but we all want to compensate our staff well to be able to recruit and retain the very best educators we have. In Beaverton, we haven't resolved negotiations yet. We actually had mediation last night. We have another one scheduled for January 7th, but we are really fortunate to be in a different position than some other districts in Oregon. Beaverton is among the best salaries and benefits, excellent benefits in the state. I mean, we comparably, I think we're the third highest in Oregon in terms of overall salaries, teacher salaries. That's because we have a really generous community that's voted for extra local funding for more teachers. But we also have smaller class sizes because of that extra funding as well. Our community also supported bond measures for our school buildings. So we have, again, we're just really blessed to be here in this community that supports us. But we're not the same. I mean, I'm from a small rural town in Eastern Oregon, Nissa, where we couldn't pass bond measures because we didn't have the capacity to do that in our community. So we know what we have here, but we want to make sure that we're able to, again, do what we can to keep and retain and recruit the very, very best. Because I know that we're fortunate to have a reserve level here to be able to do certain things that other systems have not been able to do. And that's because previous boards, previous administrations have done a phenomenal job here in Beaverton to be able to have a reserve level, to be able to mitigate situations that come in they come in on a yearly basis, sometimes a monthly basis to our school staffs. So for example, the last year we've been able to infuse $12 million additional dollars, $12 million into our special education program. That's $70 million because we had that reserve, because we heard from our educators about the needs in our buildings. Without a reserve, we can't do that. And we're having to cut. And we're overspending right now because we're not keeping up with our, using some educational terms, we're deficit spending in our system. So we're overspending. It's like your house using a credit card. We're using a credit card right now, so we know we're going to need to make some cuts this year. And those are tough. But we do want to be able to do what's right for our educators, and we will do what we can for our educators because we know and we value each and every one of our 6,000 employees we have in Beaverton. But we also need to have, again, that piggy bank to be able to offset any issues that happen every year. So again, that's something that we're going to continue to do, but we are paying attention to everybody that's bargaining, not just Portland and Beaverton, Hillsborough, Tigard, all my neighbors. We pay attention to them and we're in constant communication because we know that we need to be able to recruit and retain the best educators, not just in Beaverton, but in the state of Oregon. So we know that. So that's what we need to advocate.
Andrea, as you know, Governor Kotek has said she wants to see greater accountability for student outcomes from school districts, which are tentatively slated to receive, well, at least she's proposed that school districts might receive $11.36 billion in state funding in the 2025-2027 biennium. And it's also no secret that schools around the state have struggled, particularly post-pandemic, to raise academic achievement levels and keep kids coming to school regularly. Do you agree with the governor that more accountability for school districts is needed? And if so, what does that look like in the state's largest districts, like the three that all three of you represent?
Well, I can't speak for my colleagues here, but I will speak for Salem-Keizer. First, the 11.36 that the governor has recommended would be a tremendous step forward. And I think that I can speak fairly for many superintendents in saying that we are incredibly grateful for that governor's recommended budget. I also, however, want to say that if every cent of that comes through, Salem-Keizer will spend almost all of that new money just in roll forward personnel costs and PERS increases. And I only add that context within the question of accountability because in reality, for reasons that are largely beyond school districts' control, that money is spent before we get it. And it is hard for me to understand an argument that says we want more accountability for school districts against costs that are escalating beyond our sphere of influence, and they want to trade money for performance. I think I would reframe it and say that I do think Oregon would benefit from reaching a point of more parity and mutual accountability on the state side. I do think that there is a paucity of policy accountability and funding accountability flowing from the state to the districts. And that has to do with a funding model that understands and keeps costs with real escalating expenses on the district sides, and also a policy apparatus that makes more informed and protective decisions before new responsibilities are pressed out to schools. Almost every new responsibility costs something, whether it's time, people, or whether it's money, it costs us something. So I think there's more to be done there. But on the district side, I will say, I do think that we as a state and we as a district need to get a little more energetic about the idea that test results tell us something. They may not tell us everything, but they tell us something. And I do think our culture is one that likes to focus on the fact that it's not everything and use that as a blanket explanation for why they don't matter much at all.
Yes, I always think test results are a window, one window. They don't tell you everything, but they do give you a look inside, and that's important. Kimberlee, Portland Public Schools is finalizing plans to put a large bond measure on the May 2025 ballot. And you've made the condition of school facilities a real focal point of your time in the district so far. Portland, Salem, and Beaverton are all lucky to have voters who have supported bonds for school facilities in the past, but even that doesn't stretch to every need. Does this group feel there's an expanded role for the state to play here? And how will you start to make that case in Salem, if so?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And first, I want to say thank you to our Portland voters. We are incredibly fortunate to have a community that values education and has consistently supported bonds to improve our facilities. But even with that support, the needs that we have has outpaced the resources available. And as we finalize our plans for the May 2025 bond measure, we also acknowledge the critical role that this state can play in addressing the gaps. There is absolutely an expanded role for the state in supporting school facilities, particularly in ensuring equitable learning environments across all of our communities. The Oregon School Capital Improvement Matching Program is the only funding source for school facilities in the entire state. And the funding is only available to school districts that can pass bonds, right? A matching grant. And the maximum grant is only $6 million, which still falls short of the actual need. Right? So local bonds, while essential, often depend on the wealth of a community, and it leaves significant disparities in facilities between districts. Right? And we believe that the state has a responsibility to step in where local funding cannot reach, ensuring that all of our kiddos have access to safe, modern, and inspiring learning spaces. And until then, we have to depend on our community and refer bonds that will not increase tax rates. And we also need to make this case in ways that inspire the advocates and the partners out there who are looking to do similar things, and collaborating with other districts like Salem and Beaverton who share the same challenges helps strengthen our collective voice. And I do believe that even just with the three of us on this call, we can highlight the impact that underfunded facilities have on our student outcomes and the long-term economic health of our state. And I also think it's important to show the legislator and state leaders the tangible benefits of investments in facilities, not just in terms of infrastructure, but I would say also in the opportunities they create for students and communities. Right? So Portland Public Schools will lead by example. And we're going to start off by making sure that we have a well-crafted bond measure that demonstrates both fiscal responsibility and a clear vision for addressing facility needs. And we hope that it will be a model. And we hope that it will reinforce our credibility as we advocate for state involvement. And again, this isn't just about fixing buildings. It's about creating equitable opportunities for students across Oregon. And we will make that case with urgency and clarity.
Great. This has been so interesting. Before I let all three of you go, let's just do a quick check around the table. In 30 seconds or less, please tell us about something in your school district that you're super excited about for 2025. Gustavo, can we start with you?
Absolutely. So thank you again. I appreciate you having us on. I think what I'm really excited about is our continued work. So I'm ending my third year, going to be beginning my fourth year in 2025. And just our strategic action plan and expansion of multilingual programs or dual language programs, I'm really excited about. We have 38,000 kids, over 110 languages, and we're going to continue to expand to meet the needs of our community and using our kids' assets in the classroom.
Andrea, what about you? What are you super jazzed about in 2025 for Salem-Keizer?
Well, my competitive spirit might come through. I wished Gustavo hadn't gone first because I think we're even better, frankly. But what's good for all Oregon's kids is good for everyone. So dual language for sure. But I think I'll also just say I've had a chance to spend time with super inspiring young people, and I wish I could just add their voices to this mix because they are smart, they are incisive, they see the world with stunning and sometimes kind of embarrassing clarity. And so I think I set off into 2025 with just this sense that whatever seems hard to us is hard, but man, we've got a generation coming that is really ready to take the reins.
And how about you, Kimberlee? In 30 seconds or less, tell us a little bit about what you're very hyped about for PPS in 2025.
Thank you so much. We are Portland proud of the work that we're doing to advance literacy and math proficiency with targeted programs that prioritize our students and their success. We are poised to deliver over the next 4 years, 3 comprehensive high schools that are state-of-the-art. And then I will say, lastly, the rebuilding of relationships with educators and community by focusing on open communication, customer service, and responsiveness. And then, of course, always at the heart of all of our work, our students and the promise that they bring into our classrooms every day.
Great, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining me. Here at the Oregonian and Oregon Live, we do our best to cover all things education related. So please keep reading and listening. Or maybe consider subscribing to our handy weekly education newsletter, which recaps all the school stories of the past week and includes some extra insights and behind the scenes detail and analysis too. If you read last week, you got to hear all about a Beaverton Middle School student called Omar that just made me laugh and laugh during my visit to his school last week. I'll drop links to relevant stories from today's conversation in the show notes, and with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, give us a 5-star review and rating in Apple Podcasts. It helps people find the show. And if you think of it, tell a friend. Help spread the word. But the very best way to support our journalism and stories and podcasts like this one is with a subscription to the Oregonian and Oregon Live. You can do that at OregonLive.com/pod support. Until next time.